Well, there's a question here that's relevant to that. Chuck says, and I'm going to throw this one to you and then I'll take it. Can you identify any politicians who are standing in the way of alternative fuels in general and who don't get the Pickens plan in particular?
No, I can't give you any specific ones. I can tell you this, that I'm starting to, when people use this when you're speaking about the Pickens plan and the argument that we are putting forward to solve the problem, is that when somebody says it won't work, ask them what their plan is. Ask them what their plan is. If they have no plan, then the plan is the status quo, which is if you have no plan and you don't want the Pickens plan, then you're for foreign oil. And, you know, we're starting to pick up a little opposition out there. And the opposition, we pretty well know where it's going to come from, but none of them have surfaced. It's a op-ed piece that's scattered around over the country. And, you know, when you look at the op-ed piece where it's from, you know who's supporting them and you know who's telling them to write this stuff. But none of the ones that are opposed to us have stuck their heads up yet.
Well, I guess I'm going to look at this a little differently because I think we can see who's going to oppose it by looking at votes Congress has already cast on solar and wind. And we had a whole series of votes this year in Congress, and it was really striking. Time and time again in the U.S. Senate, we would get 58, 59 votes to be for wind or solar, whether it was the production tax credits or whether it was a national renewable mandate to guarantee that if you produce wind and solar electricity, you'll have a market. And time again, about 40 U.S. senators cast a vote against us or didn't show up, which had the same effect. And I have to tell you, Boone, John McCain was one of the ones who missed every single vote when he could have put green energy over the top. He actually landed one day. He landed at Dulles about 2 o'clock. They were having a vote on renewable power that night. And there was an AP reporter with him on the plane. She asked him how he was going to vote. He said he didn't know. He went back to the Capitol. He didn't come to the floor for the vote. The vote, we got 59 votes, and if we'd gotten 60 votes, those production tax credits would have been approved this spring. And later on, McCain said if he'd been there, he wouldn't have voted for it. So I think we do have a problem that there are politicians out there who don't seem to get the fact that you're for all of the above. There's some things there that I'm probably not for. But the key thing is we heard an awful lot tonight about nuclear. We heard an awful lot tonight about offshore oil. Those aren't big enough to solve the problem. Would you agree?
Well, let's go back to McCain. In his defense, that I think if he was here and you said you didn't vote for the production tax credit, I think that what I would hear from him was there were other things on that bill that he could not accept. And
actually, on that vote, there were not. That was a pure freestanding vote, and he didn't show up to break the filibuster. On that vote, it was a clean vote. He didn't vote for it. He may say he didn't vote for it because he didn't like something else about it, but it wasn't a Christmas tree. There were some Christmas trees. And finally, of course, they passed it as part of this huge bailout Christmas tree. So at the end of the day, it ended up being passed as part of a huge Christmas tree.
But if it had passed last spring, it wouldn't have made any difference because it was still available until they extended it.
Well, actually, there were a lot of contracts that were canceled this fall. A lot of contracts and projects were slowed down. It wasn't fatal. It wasn't fatal. It was almost fatal. But the reason
But you've got to get it beyond 1 year.
And we got to get it beyond the idea that this is something that you hold for 6 months. It didn't pass, even though we had the votes, because they wanted to hold it hostage for something else. They wanted to say, well, I don't agree about the ultimate minimum tax. We got to get green energy. We got to get the Pickens plan to the point that it can't be held hostage. That everybody understands that getting energy right is job number one.
Well, we have got to. Well, let's go back to the question that you said, were there those? We're going to identify all of them that do not have an energy plan or don't take the Pickens plan. Then we're going to identify them, and they will be identified as being for foreign oil because that's exactly where they're going to come out.
Yeah.
So here, everybody is going to have to finally, as my grandmother said, Sonny, someday everybody has to sit on their own bottom. And here, every one of them are going to have to sit on their own bottom and have some energy plan. And we have the best plan. There's no other plan out there.
Well, I think actually I support your plan, but I also think we got to do more than one thing. You want to repower America. We also need to refuel America, and I think it's very, very important that people understand we got a huge opportunity to rebuild America. Right now, we're using a lot of our natural gas in our vehicles. We're also using a lot of natural gas to heat and cool buildings, and half of the natural gas that we use to heat and cool buildings, frankly, we're heating or cooling the great American sky. We're heating or cooling the outdoors. It's a waste. And we could create millions of new jobs if we said, let's take all of our old houses, our old leaky office buildings, let's rebuild them, let's bring them up to modern standards. We could put people to work, and that would free up another big bunch of natural gas, which we could use to displace foreign oil. We got to go after foreign oil every place in our economy.
Every place. I agree with you. And conservation is a huge item, no question about that. The nuclear is good. The drilling's good. The biofuels is acceptable. And the natural gas is the only thing in large quantities that you can reduce the foreign oil.
Okay. Well, I'm going to have to slightly disagree with you.
Okay.
The nuclear doesn't make economic sense. I mean, what I like to say is, people say, well, where are you on nuclear? And I like to say, well, the first utility that comes into my office and says, I'm going to build one with my own money, they give the man a big bear hug and say, God bless you, you must have a lot. Because the fact is, right now, nuclear power is just not affordable. And as far as the offshore oil drilling is, as you know full well, and as you've told me, Boone, there's a lot less oil there than the government's saying. It's not really going to make a big difference, and it's kind of a distraction. It misses the point.
Let's do it, though.
Well, I would say let's not do it, but you and I can disagree about that.
Okay, but I say let's do it and shut them up, because if you don't do it, it'll always be held as that it's there if we just go out and do it. So let's go out and take a look at it, see if it is or it isn't.